Welcome to Something to Talk About from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. We're happy to have you here. Today, we're going to be talking about On Tyranny, a book by Timothy Snyder that came out, I think it was in 2017. Yep, and has become, it was relevant then and it's more relevant now. We're going to walk through what is in that book, and I hope talk briefly about the 20 lessons from the 20th century that Professor Snyder has put together based on his experience as a history professor and an expert on such topics as the Holocaust. But before we do that, I want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Suquamish people, the people of the clear salt water. The Suquamish have lived on the waters of the Salish Sea and adjoining lands since time immemorial. We honor them, and we are learning from their stewardship about how to be better stewards ourselves of these lands and waters. Also, Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island sponsors Something to Talk About. They offer independent living, assisted living, and memory care on Rolling Bay, and they have day stay and respite care programs too. To find out more, call 206-594-1010 or visit their website, fieldstonecommunities.com. If you are planning to go for a visit, call that number, 206-594-1010, and ask for Randy or Jamie, and they'll be happy to treat you to lunch if you are interested. So this book, On Tyranny, Kimi Kinoshita and I were talking about it. It's a book that you, Kimmy, were having your book group read, right? Or a book group.
No, I invited people in general, my friends that wanted to discuss the book when it became clear that we needed some guidance with how to negotiate and navigate in this world or in our country right at this moment in time. And Reed, I'd also like to know who has read the book, because that'll give some context. Maybe we don't have to do it.
So Catherine raises her hand. She has read this book. Have any of you other Sheila has read it? I think that it's kind of interesting. When we were putting this program together, I sent out a link to the John Lithgow reading of it. And I think it's worth just kind of walking through it, even if we don't, I'm not going to read the whole book, although it's remarkably not very long. What is it, 126 pages?
A lot of sound bites.
Yep, and I think that you actually had an illustrated copy. Mine doesn't have any pictures.
Oh, so you really don't know how to get the emotive qualities of the words.
So you can hear, I mean, John doesn't go through the whole book. He just reads the high level top
right, the banner
lessons.
What I did with mine was I read one section every morning while I was eating breakfast and considered and meditated on it and so on and so forth each day.
So did you get through the 20 days?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely.
So when you finished it, Sheila,
then I gave it away. So I don't even have it in my hands anymore because I gave it away, and the person I gave it to is rather curmudgeon-y, and he thought it was excellent. So
what was your big takeaway from this list of 20 questions, Sheila, just at a high level?
Historically speaking, he's nailed it. What I took away from it was that I wanted desperately to be able to sit down and talk with people after each reading. So I took that away. And so I'm glad about this. But I still think that even though it's several years old, it's 8 years old, my goodness, it still is appropriate for what's going on in our life today.
For sure. It may be even more so because he lays out the kind of things that you can expect when a government is trying to take control away from the governed,
Right.
you can expect to see, and make suggestions about ways to respond as those fundamentals arise.
People got upset about him in that he left Yale back a year or so ago. And the reason he did was not because, actually, he left during Biden's time and went up the University of Toronto, is where he teaches now. And the reason he did was because of his family and his kids. I think it had to do with the educational system up there, mostly.
Well, and I also watched a video he put out this week about that on his Substack, and he was
Yes.
saying that he was interested in teaching in a public university where there was more diversity in the student body and
Economically and everything. Yeah.
right. So, Catherine, you also read this book. Do you have a takeaway or two?
Lots of takeaways. I thought that he very much expressed what we need to know right now. And I actually hosted a group here for about 8 weeks. And it took a lot longer for us to get through the book because we kept bringing in other situations of what was current, what was coming down the pike at us. And I felt like it needed to be a turnaround. I need to just host another round of this with another group immediately. I very much appreciated a few parts that hadn't necessarily crossed my mind. And one was in chapter 13, when he talks about two boundaries that need to be crossed. And one was that ideas about change must engage people of various backgrounds, so we're not always preaching to the choir. And the second thing was that people need to find themselves in places that aren't their homes, among groups that have not been their friends. And so to jump out of the comfort zone and enter a new layer of dialogue. Of course, there were many things in this book that were important, but that's one that I'm still pondering.
Yeah,
Yes.
that struck me too, Catherine. And that's part of the reason why when I get in groups, I keep telling people, or not telling them, but trying to explain the value of, you know, crossing borders, our own borders. And because after I read the statistics on that last election, if more of the moderate Republicans and more of the, and there are a lot of them, the majority of Americans are really moderates. They're not super leaning progressives on the left or, right-wing nationalists. They are sitting there in the middle, and yet no one was speaking to them. And so I found that exceptionally important now, because unless we allow for an expansion of ideas and grow our community, we are going to be in really deep trouble. So
Yeah, I would say that that there are indications we're already in some trouble. So I'm just going to walk through these and present them and invite people to comment. We're not going to spend the time that Catherine's team did, I don't think, going deep on each one, but it'll just give us an opportunity to have an overview. And I welcome you to consider picking up this book and making new friends by maybe hosting a book group. Sheila has talked about how she has enjoyed working with other folks by filling out postcards at the Town and Country Market. And you certainly could, agree to meet there or some third place. have a cup of coffee or tea at the senior community center, and the weather's nice, you could probably sit outside and talk about some of these things with people you're getting to know. The first of his 20 lessons is do not obey in advance. Any comments about how most power to authoritarians is given freely? And so people see something that the repressive government wants and offer to meet their needs. I can think of a couple of recent examples of that. Anybody want to jump in with their observation of somebody obeying in advance? I'm thinking of perhaps the law firms who immediately made concessions to the administration's request to offer pro bono services to them. Some educational institutions stepped right up and said they would make modifications in their program to try to appease the administration's desires.
I was struck by the speed at which change can happen, and that chapter gets right into the nuts and bolts of it. That regime change can happen really fast, and it explains it concisely. That most people don't understand that part. They're struck, they're dumbfounded, they're numb or frozen, and it's hard for them to find, where can I act? And I think that that's a really important chapter.
Yeah, I'm always mumbling it under my breath a lot of times when people will agree to something. And one of the examples they use in this chapter is the Yale University experiment, when they zap the students, random Yale students are asked to apply electrical shocks to
Right.
and they don't know that they're part of the experiment, but then they writhe in pain, and then the gentleman in the lab coat keeps telling them to, I mean, he's supposed to be the science professor, right? No, you have to up it because this experiment won't work unless you do that. So, people are willing to do, I mean, intelligent, caring people are willing to do things that instinctively, because authority tells them to do that. So I think there's a whole space for reflecting and kind of looking inward. And that's why I think this journey is not only one of ideas, but about, spiritual transformation. I mean, you have to have some kind of moral, fortitude and certitude in order to kind of step out. Now, I don't want to get hurt, but
Right.
I want to do the right thing too. So in a community, when you're always reinforcing each other, this is going to be hard, but we need to show some courage and do this.
And we'll get to that particular word, courage, at the very end. But number 2 is defend institutions. Institutions need help. Don't expect that they can hold up their half of the bargain on their own. They fall one after another unless each is defended from the beginning. Examples of that you may come to mind.
Well, certainly the one about Harvard and, bucking that up and not going under.
Yes, and I think about the Institute for Peace, which is still
Mhm.
roiling.
Yep.
It's like, okay, what is the actual legal responsibility? You could fold, but the lawyers who were involved in that organization said the USIP was not going to cave without a fight, and they're still fighting with the administration about whether they can remain independent.
But then most of the federal organizations like the Department of Ed, and they all went because the only one that's kind of fighting because they're in a parallel universe is the National Park Service.
Yeah, and I think that there are, I mean, there have been judgments that have gone that are not clear yet about how the courts are going to act, but the courts, I guess, in this spirit of institutions, the courts are institutions, and so they need to be supported by citizens who aren't part of those institutions to say, you need to honor these court judgments. And some of those people are elected officials, but some of them are just folks, just citizens.
I take it to the media. If we want free speech, we need to be paying for it and not always going to the free uh, method, but support our independent newspapers, support local news. And so that's one of them. I also am reflecting on the federal workers and what they've been through. And I do believe that a lot of those groups are still in court waiting for their day.
Yes.
Yeah, they're really in a precarious position, you know.
So there's been a lot written lately about the lack of cohesion in the Democratic Party. And number 3 in the 20 lessons from the 20th century is beware of a one-party state. Parties that remake states and suppressed rivals were not omnipotent from the start. They exploited historic moments to make political life impossible for their opponents. So support multi-party systems and vote. I guess we've said that for a long time, but really vote.
And while we can,
Yeah, I do feel like one of the things that that came out of the last election, and it has been for several years, is the number of people who are eligible to vote who don't exercise that franchise.
always.
I think that it's a challenge for many people because they haven't felt like their vote counted. And yet we are in a crisis because if indeed the route that is currently being led with Project 2025, and as government agencies are broken down, broken apart, defunded, the the loyalists, the top bracket of folks running the country will have the ability to eliminate the messaging, eliminate and only use their marketing, and very easily take over what we have thought was truth in voting or the ability to vote. So I feel like we don't have 2 years.
Yeah.
Also, we have two parties ostensibly in the, you know, in Congress, but they, you know, they're not having discussions like you expect them to have as representatives of their states and their locales. So we are a one-party state.
Yeah, although you could expect that, you know, as the
Elections,
well, no, as the individuals who vote or could vote on elections, as Americans, we do and should have conversations with our elected officials in between elections. So if you live somewhere where your representative is voting in a way that doesn't seem reflective of your wishes or your sense of what your neighborhood would like to see, you still have the right to and should communicate with them. So you can vote, you can soft vote in between elections too.
but you also know that a lot of them are not holding town halls anymore. And they
That's
are,
right.
yeah,
One of the things we met with Emily Randall, who's the U.S. representative for the 6th district, congressional district, which is where the senior community center is. And one of the things that she said was that if you if you are not able to get through to your elected official and you have a story to tell about how the actions that are going on right now affect you, you can write her office and she can walk across the aisle and talk to them and say, you know, your constituents are writing me because you're not responding to them.
Excellent.
Number 4 is take responsibility for the face of the world. Symbols today enable the reality of tomorrow. So notice symbols of hate, swastikas, other kinds of posters and statements that that seem to indicate hatred for the other. Don't look away and don't get used to them. Remove them if you can, object to them, and encourage others to do the same. It is interesting about how, you know, small symbols can make a big difference. We talked a little while ago with Ollie and Janice Peterson, who have been promoting this idea of wearing paper clips as a subtle statement of solidarity with resistance. And there are other things, you know, I think that Kimmy, you gave me a alternate
Smokey the Bear, resistance.
yeah, Smokey the Bear saying resist. Little things like that can help.
Yes, little love letters, stickers, anything.
Sheila gave me a little sprout that's like I'm sprouting resistance. Whatever it is, it means it gives you an opportunity to talk to somebody. And I feel like the lighter hearted it is, the better. Anger is not the best response to anger.
Better to wear a glittery crown, right, Catherine?
Exactly. I have a friend that's leaving small, like business card size love notes all over the place. And that's
Good.
her forms of resistance.
If any of you who are on here and have a comment to add to this, an observation, feel free to just pop up or raise your hand. I'm happy to be talking with you, Catherine and Kimmy, but I welcome anybody who has a comment to throw in here. Number 5 is remember professional ethics. When political leaders set a negative example, professional commitments to just practice become more important. It's hard to subvert the rule of law state without lawyers. Authoritarians need obedient civil servants. So the idea of encouraging others to observe professional ethics, if you were a lawyer considering the idea of requesting people who are breaking the law to be disbarred, and if you are in a business situation where you're being asked to compromise your values just to help grease the wheels, think twice about saying yes to that.
Well, I'm a teacher, and that teacher who had to bring down that welcome sign to all is outrageous, and everyone should be outraged by that. And they were in that community and supported her. So, you know, it's every profession that deals with the public and have the care of children and well-being of seniors.
That's right. That's right. And the idea of talking about it, the idea of talking about it in advance or building those partnerships allows you to have the strength that you were talking about earlier. I think that you can have more courage when you know that you're not the only one standing up. And when you do make a stand, people will often respond to that. They'll be sort of shaken into action. Now, here's one we've been seeing a lot in the news with the
Yes,
with the
recently.
with the
I-
immigration crackdown, which is one of the biggest elements of the administration's effort to demonstrate its power. Beware of paramilitaries is the lesson number 6. When men with guns who have always claimed to be against the system start wearing uniforms and marching with torches, the end is nigh. When a pro-leader paramilitary and the official police and military intermingle, the end has come.
Well, then the end has come.
Well, there certainly are instances where it looks as though people are being deputized, or people without without uniforms are performing the act of policing, and that should not be allowed. Or wearing masks while they're arresting people, so that we don't know who it is that's doing this work. It's a faceless stormtrooper type of experience. Very, very intimidating to face as somebody who's facing authority that way.
But it is being allowed.
It is. It's also being objected to, and
Yeah, people screaming and, you know,
well,
barking.
and I feel like Chris Van Hollen going down to El Salvador, and people. I think our own congressional delegations went to the Tacoma
Detention.
ICE detention center and exercised their right to go in and look. Those are all efforts to counter that. Number 7 is, if you must be armed, be reflective. If you carry a weapon in public service, may God bless you and keep you, but know that the evils of the past involved policemen and soldiers finding themselves one day doing irregular things. That's another sort of example of maintaining your professionalism. Number 8 is stand out. It's easy to follow along. It can feel strange to do or say something different, but without that unease, there is no freedom. Remember Rosa Parks, the moment you set an example and the spell of the status quo is broken. I mentioned that a minute ago, and others will follow. And Kimi, you have been out there with maybe Catherine, it sounds like, because you were talking about tiaras on Highway 305.
We go tomorrow. We roll tomorrow.
I've
And
only had the opportunity to go twice, but I felt like it was so potent, and for the most part, we get a positive response. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if we don't, we're still out there smiling and jumping around.
well, and that's a way to do something different that does not necessarily mean something intimidating. You're inviting support rather than demanding it. Okay, number 9, excuse me, is be kind to our language.
Darn.
Avoid pronouncing the phrases everyone else does. Think of your own way of speaking. Make an effort to separate yourself from the internet. Well, there you go. Here we are on the internet talking about separating ourselves from the internet. But the idea of avoiding group speak, of sort of
Chanting.
taking up what is sort of the said thing. And there's a lot of comment in this section about 1984, George Orwell's book.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea that you should think for yourself. And when you're borrowing other people's phrases, you might not be thinking them through.
Reading. I love it that he really
Right. He
focused on
said
reading
read
here.
books.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's sad that we have to write that.
Yes, and there's and read long. He'll mention in a minute the idea of reading longer material rather than articles that are not just the quick take 4-paragraph report.
And then put things into your own words, because then you've thought about it, A and B, it'll sound different and very you.
Lesson 10 is believe in truth. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, then no one can criticize power. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle. the biggest wallet pays for the brightest blinding lights. So that challenge of rooting out the true does involve things like reading books and reading multiple articles and trying to figure out what something means. Who is saying what? There's definitely a bias in the news media to over trust authority and under trust disparate voices or voices that don't have sort of the imprimatur of either an organization or an office. And so it takes longer and deeper to read stories to find out if the story that the authority is saying is the one that matches the deeper reality or truth.
I think it's helpful to wake up in the morning and ask oneself, what is my truth? And remind ourselves, what are we here for? What are we living for? Where is our joy? Because we can easily get buried into a place of despair in all that is happening.
And number 11 is investigate, which is what I was just talking about, the idea of looking deep to find out before you just believe something that that flies across your screen. It might be wrong, or it might be a lie. It also might be just a misrepresentation based on not the full story. And I know that I often kind of wonder, okay, so who's saying that? There was, this terrible attack in Boulder yesterday. I noticed that the FBI immediately called it a terrorist attack. And the local police said, it's too early to say. We're investigating who was involved and who they were talking to. So that secondary local chief of police seemed to me, in this case, to have a better grounding on the fact that we don't know what we don't know. And so that it's like, calm down, wait a minute. That's also in here. Okay, number 12. If I can turn my page here. Number 12 is make eye contact and small talk. Part of being a citizen and a responsible member of society is to connect. It's a way to stay in touch, break down social barriers, and understand whom you should and should not trust. So make connections, look people in the eye, make connections with the people you live near or work with or at the gym.
No, that's really a powerful, simple thing that people can do.
Yeah, it turns people, it also avoids to some degree, or at least fights against the idea of imagining somebody to be the other or wrong. Might be more complicated than that.
And then the two sentences that stood out from me for that 12 was having old friends is the politics of last resort, and making new ones is the first step toward change. And that's those two. I'm reminding myself of that.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of Karen Vargas. One of the main things she always talks about is find a common ground when you're talking with somebody. It might be kids, it might be movies, it might be a book, it might be whatever. But to follow up, if you can find a common ground with somebody, there's a good possibility you might be able to begin a conversation.
"20 lessons, number 13, practice corporeal politics. Put your
Yes.
body into the story.
Yes, I say this all the time.
I know you do. I can't keep up with your body. It's all over. Here I am. No, there she is. Where will she be tomorrow? But power wants your body softening into your chair and your emotions dissipating on the screen. Basically, the position of doom scrolling. Looking at the news on your phone and just feeling worse and worse and feeling like you really cannot do anything. So Get outside, put your body in unfamiliar places with unfamiliar people. Make new friends. And as Kimmy would agree, march with them. Number 14 is establish a private life. That means allow yourself to have connections that are not digital, that are not being available. One of the things that I think I was reading about this weekend was that Palantir, the what's it called, the software or company, has been working with the federal government to try to unify all the information the government has in a shared database so that they can cross-reference information about us. And I think that that's, one reason you might want to have some conversations that aren't that don't have digital footprints.
In our book group, actually, we use the rule of turning off the phones, leaving them in the cars or wherever, so that there couldn't be no recording and no listening in.
Yeah, well, and of course our phones are GPS systems that tell
Where you are.
where you are, when you were there, how long you were there, who was there with you, because they, you look at those airdrop things with your iPhone where somebody sends you a picture because they're close enough to send it to you. It's like, okay, so, and I remember with the COVID stuff, there was an app that would say, oh, you were actually in close proximity to somebody who has since tested from COVID. So yeah, there's a lot that can be gleaned. And that's challenging. Number 15 is contribute to good causes. Pick a charity or two that you want to support. I think that one of the things Catherine and I have done is auto pay some new news sources. Moved off of some of the ones that I was paying my subscriptions to and found some new ones that I felt were more
Informative.
closely aligned with my, like, for example, ProPublica is an organization that I feel investigative reporting they're doing, that supporting and being republished in other magazines and newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post, but they're the ones who are, from a nonprofit status, hiring investigative reporters and doing the courageous work. Number 16 is learn from peers in other countries. Keep your friendships abroad or make new friends in other countries. Maybe this, Sheila, could be part of Timothy Snyder's work at the University of Toronto now. The present difficulties in the US are an element of a larger trend, and no country is going to find a solution by itself. We have to the multinational corporations are not respecting borders. We need to do the same.
I found that same to be so true after listening to Timothy Snyder's video that I just finished, and you referred to it too, Reed.
Yep.
He's been all over. He goes to Ukraine all the time. His wife is 4 times now in Ukraine in the last little bit. So yeah, it's a matter of being universal.
Number 17 is look or listen for dangerous words. And this sort of was what I was saying maybe about the FBI's comment about the terrible attack in Colorado. But immediately the use of the words extremism or terrorism or the notions of emergency or this is an exceptional situation are powerful words that can twist your understanding of what's really going on.
Well, that's because of what's going on in the world. We hear those words and it's like a, it turns right off. But what was the word you said the FBI used?
Oh, it was a terrorist attack, they said off the bat. And the local policeman, I don't know, it might be, but the local police chief was saying it's too early to really understand who was behind this. We've arrested a person. And so it will take some time to figure out whether it's terrorism or something else.
Or mental illness, I think, in this case.
I understood this chapter. However, I also understand the urgency of the times we're in and that it doesn't feel like we have 2 years to vote somebody out. So
Yeah.
I have a bit of a struggle with this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do think that the warning here is modern and not so modern. I mean, our current authority, the sense after 9/11 was that we are in danger as a country. And so there was an immediate push to put forward the Patriot Act. I mean, it was called the Patriot Act as
Mhm.
a way to reduce freedoms, reduce privacy, increase authoritarian power, which, we've been living under ever since.
Both parties.
And if we didn't
Yes.
agree with it, that means we're not patriots.
Correct.
Right.
That's how they frame the dialogue.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly, Kim. Exactly.
And the immigration thing was all about extremism and terrorism, right? They were
Right.
all rapists and, eating your pets.
Right. They're just right.
Fear.
So 18 on the 20 lessons is be calm when the unthinkable arrives. So that's sort of when it sounds like there's a terrorism or crackdown or something. That's because that's exactly what the authorities need to acquire new powers against the populace. A sudden disaster that requires the end of checks and balances, dissolution of opposition parties, suspension of freedom of expression, the right to a fair trial. It's the oldest trick, Snyder says in the Hitlerian book.
And that's exactly what Bondi's done.
It probably goes back before Hitler, but
Well, they called the state of emergency after that fire, right, in Germany.
right.
And that
The
state of
Reichstag.
emergency was in force for 12 years. So,
Right, and one of the things that the Supreme Court is considering right now is whether the Alien Enemies Act, which is supposed to be instituted in the event of an invasion, whether we actually legitimately are in an emergency or it's being called that, so that the act can be in place.
Right.
Okay, so number 19, after all this talk about patriotism being used as a cover for authoritarianism, Timothy Snyder says, be a patriot. Set a good example for what America means for generations to come, which, to my mind, also a way you might put that is be a good ancestor.
Yeah.
So that your grandkids will, or whatever, whoever they are, will know that you were doing what you could when there was a point to do it.
well, listen.
It feels
Well,
like we
we are
need a new word. Excuse me, Kimi?
Oh, go ahead, Catherine. What's the new word
I'm
you
saying it
suggest?
feels like we need a new word because it's been conscripted, and
Which
I
one?
have trouble using that word now.
Patriot? Oh, well, he defines it. So if you don't have the definition, then you know, like on my the 25th poster I made, it said, calling all patriots, defend the Constitution. Because we all, as a teacher, as a president, as every member of any political office, you have to pledge to that.
I'll just read that section. A patriot wants the nation to live up to its ideals, which means asking us to be our best selves. A patriot must be concerned with the real world, which is the only place where his country or her country can be loved and sustained. A patriot has universal values, standards by which he or she judges his nation, her nation, always wishing it well and wishing it would do better. So a patriot is a true believer in the potential of the future.
In the goodness of people to make it happen.
And finally, number 20, be as courageous as you can. If none of us is prepared to die for freedom, then all of us will die under tyranny. That's his statement.
Wow.
And then he has no further words on that, but be courageous as you can. You know, I was reading a little bit about the upcoming June 14th parade in Washington, D.C. and protests that are expected around the country. And there are, you know, people who are concerned that this is going to be used as a pretext for
Military.
for grabbing more authority. And so one could think, okay, let me obey in advance just to avoid that problem.
Mhm.
And I think the challenge is to be courageous and recognize that we have to promise each other that we will be there for each other if things get scary. And they do get scary. I mean, I think that often when we have conversations like this, I'll get a comment afterwards, an email or a call, concerned about the fact that we are not supposed to talk about this sort of stuff, certainly not as a nonprofit. And I assure people that the only thing nonprofits are not allowed to do is to endorse specific candidates. That's verboten for a 501c3, but advocacy, that's part of the job that we do. In many cases, we do that here with a focus on people who are 50 plus. But that many of us are 50 plus, and we're an important part of the population. And as the elders of the community, we're in a good place to put things in perspective for the wider community, I think.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
We do have an opportunity to listen to some thought leaders coming up on June 7th at Linwood Theater called Standing Together Bainbridge Island. And you can go to standingtogetherbainbridgeisland.org for more information. However, that begins at noon with our speakers starting and ends at 2:30. And in regards to the June 14th march, one of the things that I've heard is if you do run into protesters that are becoming violent, the message that is going out is to sit down and become as nonviolent as possible so that those who are the problem can be recognized.
Correct.
Thank you. It's
Well, that's the one
standing-
that we're going on the ferry, right?
Some
it's
are.
standingtogetherbi.org is the website to find out about the upcoming get together in Linwood. And there are folks all over the country on June 14th that will be on the ferry, off the ferry, beyond the ferry. Anyway, thank you all. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Kimmy, very much for suggesting our little ad hoc book group here. And as always, if anybody has any suggestions for topics that we could cover on these podcasts, I welcome them. reed@biseniorcenter.org. And with that, I wish you a good